Welcome to Using Your Power. I'm David Andrew Wiebe, and joining me as always is
Maveen, Kaura.
How's it going, Maveen?
I'm doing good, David. Just, ready to record today and lots of things on my mind. So I'd love to just kind of get some of those things out and see how we can help people.
Considering today's topic, it's not surprising that there's a lot on your mind. And if you're just joining us, well, we're going to be talking about entitlement. And there actually are a few different definitions of entitlement and a few different meanings we attach to it. Like most of the time when we think of entitlement, we're just thinking of people that maybe were brought up on a trust fund and they feel they're deserving of absolutely everything. But we want to go a little deeper than that. So the dictionary defines entitlement. There's basically three different definitions. One is the fact or having a right to something, which in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? Two, the amount to which a person has a right, which is a lot like the first definition. And then three is the one that we typically associate with entitlement these days, the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the third one is the biggest one that we see in everyday society is people thinking that they deserve something more than other people. Absolutely. It's that, like you said, it's that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, or, my parents are ultra wealthy or whatnot, right?
And it might not even be that. Like, I think part of this quote unquote entitlement generation is the idea that like almost everybody is somewhat privileged and still feeling deserving of everything. But I think, a lot of what we used to see was maybe the trust fund baby or silver spoon in your mouth kind of phenomena.
Do you think that's changed quite a bit, David?
I don't know if that's changed, but what I do know is that, the millennials have been called kind of the entitlement generation. We just think we are deserving of a better job. We are deserving of more pay. I think it's not bad to see things that way, but if you're not willing to work for it, if you're not willing to do anything about it, I'm sorry, everybody that came before you worked very, very hard, right? Maybe Generation X or even before that, like the baby boomers were known for work ethic. Right. That's another thing we'll get into. But
absolutely. And, it's funny you said work ethic because I think they worked very tough, the baby boomers. And now, if you've worked that many years, you should sometimes feel entitled to getting more than what you potentially have, right? And you're right, we'll get into that and kind of where things are going well for some people and where, maybe the government and we as a society have maybe failed with the entitlement.
Yeah, or maybe where we need some adjustment in our thinking. The first thing that I think is really important to consider with entitlement is expectations. So where are your expectations coming from? And have you ever actually, stopped to think about where those expectations are coming from? I think you can have like expectations for yourself and about what you're going to do to achieve your goals or what you're going to do to bring yourself closer to where you want to be in the future. But expectations for others can so often be misplaced. Like in leadership, it's a whole other thing where people will rise to the level of your expectations. But in personal relationships, it doesn't work that way, does it? Like I haven't found that you can have expectations for others, but the problem with that is like unspoken expectations become premeditated resentment. That was something like my counselor told me a long time ago, and I was like, yeah, that's so true. Like if we don't express them early, like especially in relationships and spouses and whoever your significant other is, if you don't express what you're expecting from them, really you're just giving yourself a license to premeditate resentment for them.
You're right. And once I think that resentment gets in, then people have a very tough time getting out of that too sometimes, right? Because your ego steps in, and that's going to be one of my points that I'll bring up in a little bit here down the road as we're chatting. But you're 100% right on that.
Yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about expectations. Just that we need to recognize if your expectations are for yourself, for your team, or for others, people that you're connected to, people that you have a friendship or a personal relationship with, it's important to differentiate. Because again, in leadership, it is always said, I think John Maxwell even says it, that people will rise to the level of your expectations. And that's not necessarily true if they're not communicated.
Right. I think, just kind of tying back to our last episode, with one of the questions you asked too, right, where are your expectations coming from? I think if you sit down with yourself and really maybe even meditate on that and say, where are these expectations of entitlement coming from that I feel I should have, right? And you'll see that there's many different places, and we'll get into that too, where that you will see that you're being bombarded by different places in society as well.
You're right. That's a great point, because I think you could also like just journal about it, and that can also bring a lot of clarity to where those expectations are coming from. But yeah, the key point being that you need to consider the source, because if it's not coming from a place of your deeper self, the self that understands how the world works, the self that has a deeper awareness of spirituality, then it's probably coming from this place of, well, I'm a physical being and I deserve physical stuff.
Absolutely. One of the things I wanted to bring up to David here was the idea of having control over other people because you feel entitled to having something, right, that other people don't have. I think control is a way that people use to really keep people down in society. I feel bad if I'm being a little bit of a bummer with saying that, but I think if you look all around us, there are people who, once they achieve certain levels of in their business or in life, they feel that they can control other people because they feel that they've worked so hard. Now they're entitled to being the best and most knowledgeable person, and having that control over people allows them to feel maybe good about themselves. I'm not too sure.
Well, and we've had those discussions actually about control being power and power coming from money. And that's why the people that are in control are interested in those things, because they can have power over things. Like if it wasn't money and if it was some other thing, I'm guessing that those people that like that control, that like that power, would go after that other thing as opposed to money. But money is one of the things that gives people a lot of control. So that's a very interesting point.
Absolutely. What do you got next on there?
I've got work ethic. So I already alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's this idea of like, how hard are you willing to work for what you want? Are you willing to work towards your dreams or for your dreams? And also, like, what are your dreams? And that might be also a question of awareness and expectations, like we just talked about. Where are your dreams coming from? Actually, this is a really interesting conversation that we had at a recent question gathering. It's one of the communities that I'm a part of, and we were just there on Sunday. But the entire presentation was kind of based around a conversation that he'd had with one of his friends about like their dreams not coming true, and his thoughts on it are very interesting. Like, is your identity tied to your dream, or are you the one that gets to define what your dream is, or are you already predestined in a way? Like, none of us are predestined. We all have a choice, but like in a sense, are we all predestined to like achieve a particular goal? Is it already part of our identity and we only have to discover that? So that to me was really interesting conversation, and would recommend you have a look at that as well. And the other thing about work ethic is just, are you waiting for everything to fall into your lap? And, there are, I think we talked about personal development in episode 1. The secret, I think, is another topic that we have to get into, or at least the law of attraction and how that all works. Some people, are of the opinion that you can just sit and think about attracting things into your life, and then they will just come if you have all the positive thoughts. And to an extent, like, I can't deny, I know successful people that meditate 4 hours per day. Is there a correlation? I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that there is some kind of correlation. But I also think that they're probably getting up very early and they're working really hard throughout the rest of the day. And that's why they need that 4 hours of meditation, just to kind of gather a bearing on, like, thinking big. What do I need to do? Like, what strategic things do I actually need to do to have the business that I want, to have the house that I want, to have the relationships that I want? And that does and will require some pretty deep thinking. So those are some thoughts on work ethic.
One of the things, David, you said that really, a couple of sentences back was talking about when people have goals and they've set these goals and they start working towards them. As soon as I think a lot of people set a goal, they feel entitled to the end result. I think that's one thing that I feel, because I think we live in a society here that doesn't really want us to accept failure and continue to work towards something that we're working on building. So when we get to that stage of success, we can say, hey, look what I did, right? Get that sense of entitlement through even accomplishment, right? Which is not a bad thing, but again, what makes us think that one, that we're always going to accomplish everything that we set out for.
We aren't.
And once you set out for that goal, we, as people, we do fail, and that's where we learn from as well, right? Either to continue with our goal by failing and learning and adjusting and trying something new, or if we do fail and say, maybe that wasn't necessarily the best idea, we can now adjust our course of action and focus in a different direction, right? But if you feel entitled to your end, and connected to that end result, then you will feel that you may be better than other people as you're working harder than others too.
That's a really interesting point. And something that came to mind about that was that we have a really bad goal setting model. Like, what is this? And I'm touching on something I'm really passionate about here. What is this SMART goal thing? Why is that good? Can you tell me why that's good? Why is the SMART goal method good? It's basically saying specific, which I totally agree with. Measurable, if possible, yes, it should be measurable, the money amount. The part that I usually have problem with is timely or time bound. So saying that I can accomplish by this date. Sorry, I don't think you're that smart. I don't think anybody is that smart to figure out when it will happen. And you're right. Like, if you're entitled to accomplishing that goal, or if you feel entitled to accomplishing that goal, I'm sorry, like, that much of that may not happen, even if you do work really hard for it. And there's many people that have tried and failed, like Thomas Edison, although they did eventually accomplish their goal because they were persevering and they knew that there was a way. They just had to find a way.
I think the idea of measuring your results in time don't necessarily have to apply towards your big goal. I do feel that they can apply towards your smaller step-by-step goal as you work towards the big picture. Just having, I think the idea of having a timeline is really just to help keep you focused. It's not necessarily set in stone, but if you can accomplish it by that day or before that day or after that day, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you're working towards accomplishing that goal, right? It's really just to kind of give you that guideline as you, as anybody works towards, developing a website or, selling products, or, especially if you're in sales, right? You want to be able to try to close certain prospects by, sometimes by the end of the month or by the end of the quarter, because sometimes that's what your paycheck's connected to.
Well, I agree on that point, and I think it's good to have deadlines. But the other day was like the perfect example, because I was having the blue screen of death on my computer. Well, that meant that I didn't get, the blog post that I needed to get done till later at night, then not the same day. The client probably would not have noticed anyway, but it's still one of those things where I didn't meet that deadline because of outside circumstances. So that's part of why we're not that smart. But I think you're also right in saying that you can adjust. So you're allowed to set a date and then say, well, it's flexible.
Right. And, you made me think of that quote, right? Life is what happens to you when you're working, or as
when you're busy doing other things.
Yeah. When you're busy doing other things, right? It's dealing with what comes up, right? Yeah. We all know what we want to accomplish. In a perfect world, I think we would be able to accomplish, what we have set out to do, but there's so many other factors, there's so many other people that can, and technology, like you said, with your example, that can hinder you from getting your goals accomplished. But if you stay on top of it and just deal with things as they come, and that's those are kind of the things I'm learning too right now as I'm developing my own business, right? Sometimes I just want to see the results right away, and day one I should see all the results. I'm entitled to those results right away, but you can't be entitled without putting in the work.
Right. A spirit of entitlement can also be tied to a very specific attitude. So, and your attitude is kind of your outlook on life, but it's something you have complete control over. And we don't like to think of it that way. We don't like to think of our attitude as being something within our control. We just say, it's our upbringing or whatever. And don't get me wrong, everything impacts you. The TV you've been watching, the people you've been hanging out with, your parents, your teachers, whoever you've looked up to, or whoever has been an mentor figure, like those things are just burned into your mind. But I'd still like to think like your attitude is something that you have control over. And so it's really partly about, how do you perceive yourself? How do you look at yourself? What do you believe about yourself that makes you worthy? Right. I think self-worthiness is a whole other subject that could be covered in the podcast, and a really important one, because if you don't feel worthy, then you just simply won't take the actions to validate that, whether it's just like asking someone out that you're afraid of asking out, or going for a gig that you didn't know that you could have, but you didn't go for because you didn't perceive yourself in that way. And another thing about attitude is like how others perceive you. So first you got to look at how you perceive yourself, and then how others perceive you. I'm sorry, but like if you come to me as somebody that feels deserving or of certain privileges or special treatment, I'm probably not going to give that to you. In fact, there's a chance that I might even ignore or block you because you're persistent in a way that's really bad. There is such thing as good persistence and bad persistence. And so you have to be aware, I think, if you have this entitlement, how others are looking at you, how others are perceiving you, because if your attitude is all me, I think people are not going to like being around you that much.
That's fairly good point. Now, I just want to give you a slightly different thought process, right? Just coming from the world of sales, there is something that's important with being persistent and having that go-getter attitude, and, sending people consistent emails and trying to, connect to the person that you need to connect to,
Well, I kind of agree more, yeah.
Yeah, you're not doing it necessarily in a way to be bothersome, although it may come off to the person reading the emails or receiving those phone calls from you, but, you're in the end trying to receive a paycheck, right? I've done that where I've consistently called the same people over and over and sent the same emails or different emails and just introducing myself, telling them why I'm emailing them, and I've come to the conclusion sometimes you got to continually do it until they tell you to stop, right? And, especially in sales, you can't expect a no until they tell you, right? If you say, 3 emails in, they're not gonna, they're probably not interested, they haven't got back to me. Well, we don't really know what's going on in the lives of these people that we're trying to get in contact with, right? I've heard of businesses, just in other podcasts that I've listened to, people who have consistently put out, email after email, 20 or 30 or even 100 different emails till the person said, oh my God, thank you so much for being persistent and getting back, trying to be in contact with me. Yes, I'd love to meet with you, or, have a phone conversation or a Skype conversation with you so we can discuss that product that you want to talk to me about, right? And people sometimes do enjoy that attitude of getting and being a go-getter attitude.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but what I'm talking about is if somebody is entitled and they're in that position of sales, they might not do that, right? That's the first possibility, is they probably won't even put in the work because they feel entitled to it, or B, they're going to say, hey man, like, why aren't you giving your money? I deserve it. Like, I've earned it already. Give me my money. Well, so like somebody that's entitled is going to go to one of those two extremes. What you're talking about is somebody who's like actually passionate about sales.
Yeah. I think you nailed it, and that's where it is, right? If you're passionate about what you're doing, by doing the work, you will get the results, which will then help you feel, and I put that in quotations, entitled to your results. But it's by putting in that work. If you
exactly,
have
and
somebody,
I think that's more an issue of worthiness over entitlement,
right? So if you have somebody come to your table that you're working at, I was selling cars, for example. If every single person I felt, I was entitled to sell the car to every single person just because they sat in my desk, I would have had way more sales.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so.
What's your next point there, Maveen?
One of the next points I have is something I'm interested in talking about is government help, right? A lot of people I find, especially in North America, are feel this sense of entitlement to get help from the government if they are not in a position that they're doing as well. It is a very interesting topic, I find.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an argument for both sides of the story, right? Where we should be taking care of people who are not taking care of themselves, and then there's the idea of not necessarily not taking care of people, but letting people if you choose that you want to be a drug addict and not take care of yourself, then that's really your own doing. Why should society take care of you because you decide not to take care of yourself, right? So is a very interesting conversation, but I did want to talk a little bit about the government and how we feel entitled by them, right? I know in Canada, for example, we have probably the best healthcare system in the world. Where
I don't know about that.
Well, I feel that. I have never had to go to the U.S. and you're paying 30-40% or $40,000 for a cast. I don't know if I'd pay $40,000 for a cast. I'd probably never wear a cast, and my arm would probably look deformed. But in Canada, I can go to the doctor, I can get the cast put on, the doctor will take it off, and my bone will heal normally, right? Is a reason we also buy health insurance when we travel to other countries, right? But it's that sense of entitlement within our own country, I find, and this is just my own opinion, I love I do like our healthcare system because I can go in and get stuff, taken care of if I ever get sick or if I break a bone or I end up in a hospital with, God forbid, any cancer. I can go get that taken care of, where in other countries I may not have that sense.
You may not qualify.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think we actually have the best possibly in North America. I think there are actually much better healthcare systems in Europe than in Canada, but I see your point. I think there's a huge contrast between America, like US, and Canada, and anybody that comes here will soon figure that out. But based on everything that I've seen and heard, I have to believe that there are some better healthcare systems in Europe. And also it's a thing of like, I've been to so many doctors here who don't care. Like they're just there and they'll be like, yeah, it looks like you might have this, just take this. Like that's not healthcare to me. Whereas somebody that's like a naturopath or a nutritionist can give you a more holistic view of your health, what's connected to what, not just like, okay, here's a pill to treat a symptom, but here's a solution to, like, okay, you're feeling an immense amount of pressure to succeed, and that's why your back is now hurting. That's interesting. So where's that pressure coming from? And then you can begin to diagnose that.
Right. And, and my main thinking was, when I first initially came up with this idea of entitlement with government help, was all the people who don't take responsibility for themselves. There's people that are out there smoking 2 packs a day and then develop cancer, and now our healthcare system has to help them because they've decided to go out and I understand it's an addiction, it's not easy to get over, and in the big picture, yeah, we got to do something about these companies that are allowed to sell cigarettes to people and get them addicted to these products, and that's, a totally different conversation. But it's very similar to that pharmaceutical conversation we were having. But if you decide to allow yourself to smoke 2 packs a day, and I decide never to smoke any cigarettes, why should you feel entitled to the Canadian healthcare system to take care of you? Right? That's kind of what my thought process was on that one.
I don't even think that's the worst of it.
No, absolutely not. And that's just, a part of it, and it's just an example in it, right?
Yeah.
Now, am I going to probably hear some backlash on it? Probably, right? But it's really just to get people to think about, their life choices, right? And when you think about the choices you make in life, drinking, if you're drinking, a bottle of, Jack Daniels every night and then get liver cancer and need a liver transplant, well, is it fair that you get that liver, or is it, why should you feel entitled to getting that liver over somebody who took care of themselves, but their liver just failed naturally, right? Who should get that liver? It's a very hard decision to make. The person who did nothing and took care of themselves, or the person who drank their liver to get that disease and now they can't live without it, right? Who would you give it to? And it's not an easy answer, but, it's something to discuss.
Absolutely. And I think part of my worldview is that nobody's going to take care of me. Nobody has my retirement in mind. Nobody has my wealth or my prosperity or my well-being or my goodness in mind. Only I have that in mind for me. Like, we are invested in other people. Like, I'm invested in you, Maveen, and
Yeah,
I know you're
absolutely.
probably invested in me, and that's a really good relationship. But for the most part, I don't see, the government playing a major role in my future. Now, granted, if for some reason I became incapacitated or unable to work, would I then depend on the government? More than likely, yes. But for the most part, my thought process is, well, they're going to tax me a ton, so I'm going to make a ton, and then hopefully that ton, the portion that goes to the government goes to serve other people in a good way.
Absolutely.
Which unfortunately we have no guarantee that it does. The government spends the money how they see fit or see it as being most important. Like, they have their own priorities, I have my own priorities, but that's kind of my view of it. Whereas you're right, there's people that will look for assistance for EI. I guess that's like employee insurance for our friends in the States and outside of Canada. People go looking for that like they deserve it, or pension programs, or like 401ks, all that kind of stuff. People feel they're deserving of, and part of it is like we've been lied to. There's no reason. The government is not interested in taking care of you. The government's not interested in maintaining a pension program. The government's not interested in paying out money when you can't work or when you have seasonal work. They're only interested in furthering the priorities for the country.
Yeah, you're right. The one thing too that I find with the government too, right now with Alberta, because we're both living in Alberta, oil country. The biggest thing out here is the last 3 years, people have been talking about a recession and EI for sure, the unemployment insurance that people get. Now they do pay into these this unemployment insurance off their their paychecks each month in the hopes that they can also collect if they ever need it, right? But and in certain instances, absolutely, it is a great help to get it. So, I mean, if you pay into something, then I do feel you are entitled to receive from it. If you're not paying into it, then why are you receiving from it? You should, it's like that concept of putting in and then taking from, right? Whatever you put in, you'll get from it, right? So it is a very interesting conversation. I mean, I can technically, I'd love to argue both sides of the story because I love playing devil's advocate to myself sometimes. But I think there is, a place that you can be entitled for things as well, as long as you put into it, right? Like we were talking about in sales, you put in the effort, you should be entitled to the results, not before you put in the effort.
I think that is like a broken system with unemployment insurance, though, because we're talking about insurance, and we all know that like paying into insurance most of the time, we don't get anything back from insurance. Like, you could speak to that maybe because you've been in insurance sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Did 6 years of insurance and absolutely right. And the idea of insurance again is to help everybody pays, the masses pay to help the few that need the help, right? So, I mean, that concept itself makes sense, but when you're hit with multiple natural disasters in multiple areas, not only just in your province or in your state, but
or
throughout your
wreck.
Country, how many people are going to continue to pay? And it's a very interesting topic that I'd love to talk about too, is insurance down the road as well.
Cool, man. I want to talk about upbringing. I think we already alluded to this point a little bit when we mentioned the silver spoon or a trust fund baby. And obviously there's no, I don't think there's any way of getting around it. It's just, it plays into this whole entitlement thing. But you have to recognize too, as like maybe a Generation Y or Generation Zer, that your parents paid a price and they want you to succeed. They want you to live your dream. They want you to go for it. But like they see that you want it, but they see that you don't want it bad enough because you're not putting in the time or effort. So what were you brought up to believe? That's another thing, journaling or meditation topic that you might want to bring to yourself, and also question it. Ask yourself whether or not those beliefs are supporting you in the direction that you ultimately want to go in. And a similar idea, which is what beliefs were instilled in you along the way, what teachers, what mentors, what counselors said to you, and are they actually legitimate? The thing about, there's a saying in entrepreneurship, and I'm probably going to butcher it. It might even be like a quote by somebody famous, but I don't know. The thing that keeps going around is if you let other people dictate what you're going to do in your life, you'll realize how surprisingly little other people have for you to do. And I think that totally plays into this idea of entitlement. If you let others dictate, and that's basically what you're doing by saying, I'm entitled to everything, so I don't have to work for it. That's basically what you're saying. So those are some questions that might want to pose yourself if you find that you're feeling deserving of privileges or special treatment just because you are you.
Right. While you're chatting here, David, one of the things I thought about was how I was actually brought up with my parents, right? And I just kind of thought about it, and I thought about maybe how some of my friends were brought up when I was back in high school as well, right? So, I mean, there are very different ways of bringing people up. I know there's the certain model where parents don't want their kids to feel entitled, and part of it I do agree with, right? Where it's this, you're 18 years old now and you're out the door, right? So, we're not going to give you everything because nothing was given to us, right? Kind of a idea of entitlement or non-entitlement in this case. And then there's the case of where the way I was brought up, being brought up in an East Indian family, the idea is to really work together sometimes and allow the children to stay at home until whatever age they need to, so they can go out and then become successful as well, right? So giving them some of the things that the parents actually didn't have either growing up, but just kind of giving it to the kids to allow them to use that, to become successful down the road, right? So both of them are giving, I think, great learnings or teachings to their kids, right? Where one is, hey, go out and make something of yourself, and two is, hey, stay at home and make something of yourself, right? Where both of them are great ways, and both of them have their place, but it's really just on how the I guess we as when we're going through that situation decide to use that, right? I see a lot of people who are 18 and out of the door and don't use that, to be responsible. They really become irresponsible, and then feel entitled for the government to take care of them because of all the bad decisions they made. Or on the flip side, there is the 18-year-olds that maybe, or they're not necessarily 18, because sometimes the parents will say to them, hey, if you're in school, you're in college or whatnot, you can stay under our roof, but as soon as you're out the door as well, right? So, but they are using that time to educate themselves and become a better person so they can be successful down the road in whatever path they choose to go down.
Yeah, I mean, it can be tough because it can feel unfair, right? Like your parents are making your decision for you. I remember that was kind of my case. It's like you're either going to school or you're working, and there's no choice in the matter. You don't get to take a gap year, and there's a lot of conversation too about like whether or not a gap year is a good idea. But you're right. Some people learn from it, become better for it, and some people actually take it the wrong way, and then they blame their parents and they blame everybody else for everything that's gone wrong in their life, and they don't actually get the lesson. So I think it is like, it depends on the person. We always have to interact or think carefully about the kind of person or who our children are or who our parents are in order to empower them. Empowering means very different things to different people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. Even if you go out, and just kind of using the same example, if you go out at 18 and you make something of yourself, you did technically empower your parents' decision.
I agree.
Right? Because they can say, hey, look, I had a hand in making my son or daughter successful because I gave them that push they needed to go out and become something, right? And vice versa. I was able to stay at home, as long as I needed to, right? Until I decided it was right time for me to move out. And it allowed me to really save enough money to buy a home down in the future, which we did recently, right? I was able to put that money away and pay for a wedding in cash, which not a lot of people are able to do, right? Because, those sense of, I didn't really have a sense of entitlement of staying at home, but my parents felt entitled to allowing me to stay home because it kept me closer to them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a variety of different circumstances and the varieties in different ways in which it can all play out. But I do like what you said about like empowering your parents' decision. I think that also ends up coming under our responsibility.
Absolutely.
But knowing yourself too, because like me personally, I know to do well, I need a lot of support. I need a lot of help. I need a lot of ongoing counseling, mentorship discussion. Without that, one withers. And maybe that's true of everybody. We all need community. We all need different people in our lives to serve different purposes.
Yeah, no, you're right, for sure. One of the things that I was thinking about was just a positive way to really use entitlement. And one of the things that I really thought about was education. I think everybody should be entitled to having a good education. I know there's countries all around the world that, make education a very important part of a child's upbringing.
And also free or low cost in some cases.
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly what I was about to say. A lot of times they're free or super low cost, or they take care of, the breakfast. That's also part of it, right? It's not that they're entitled to getting a breakfast, these kids, but they make it a part of the education system because they really want these kids to thrive and take something from the education and go, education system and go make something of themselves, right? Now, I know not everybody's going to take advantage of that either, because there are a lot of times people don't want to take things that are free. Some people, when you pay for something, they take it and use it more than something that's free, right? It's like same concept of giving away a free course online. How many people are going to read it? How many people put real value to it and are going to use it versus putting out a course for maybe $100 and then, how many people are going to use that course? Because the more money you got to put towards something, the more likely you are to use that to potentially, guide your life in the right direction as well.
And this would be a pretty expansive subject on education where, even if education was free, if they're just training people to be factory workers, it's a fairly outdated model, but that's still kind of what we have more or less in North America, unless you take some alternative routes. We're not focused on people skills, budgeting, anxiety management, leadership, solving interesting problems, like things you can't just learn on Google.
That's right.
we don't talk about those kinds of things. So to me, it seems like that's where the focus of education should be. But I like that idea. I like the idea that everybody should be entitled to some kind of education. We've benefited in ways maybe we don't even recognize. Like, I feel like the number one thing I learned from high school was typing, but that isn't to say, there weren't other valuable things from high school.
Absolutely. The other thing while you were just chatting here, David, one of the things I thought about is, our library system too is part of our education system, right?
True.
I mean, at this age, I'm 38 years old right now, and I still go to the library to get some books when I want to just quickly learn something about a topic, just to start reading about it, just to see if I'm going to even have any interest in that topic. So I'll go to the library, pick up a couple books, and see if that's kind of what I want to learn, right? Because if it's not what I want to learn, I really don't feel like it's a smart move to go and invest $200, $300 in buying these books to then say, it's not necessarily something I want, man. I just spent $200 and I got to try to sell them to somebody else particularly on Amazon or something as a used book, right? So, if we take advantage of our systems that we do have in place, I know Calgary a couple of years ago made the library card free. And then I look at it and say, well, how many people are taking advantage of that as well, right?
Now that we have the internet, it's just like less.
Yeah, it is, right? It is a little less, but it is harder to read full books, every single full book on the internet as well, right? Especially depending on the topics that you're looking to learn,
you can't
right?
find them all necessarily.
That's right.
Yeah. My last point about this, and I think it really ties in with everything I've already shared, is awareness. Like, how aware are you of how you're coming across to others? We've talked about endorsements in an earlier episode. Well, so are you an endorsable person? Because if you're not, people aren't going to get behind you, right? And what does an endorsable person mean? To me, it means a person that's honest and transparent and somebody of integrity and somebody that has value to share with the world. That's somebody that's endorsable. That's somebody that will be given opportunities. Meanwhile, somebody that has this air of arrogance, this air of, well, I should just be given it, may not, you might have you're still going to have some opportunities. As long as you're alive, there'll be some opportunities, but you're not necessarily going to get the same ones, and you're not necessarily going to get more. So.
No, you're right. And, what are some things what do you feel, David, that you could do there to kind of maybe feel less entitled with that?
Well, I think what we've covered earlier about journaling, meditating, asking yourself better questions. It's hard to do that from the place that you are, because you might not know what that better question is, and so reaching for it might be difficult. But I think if you think carefully about who you're interacting with and how you're coming across, and you know what, if you have absolutely no idea and you're just like, yeah, like, I don't know, I'm just me. So okay, ask friends. Ask all of your friends and get them to be brutally honest, and don't take their first answer. Just be like, no. Tell me honestly, how am I coming across? Who am I to you? And then I think you'll start to get some answers that make sense.
Yeah, you're right. And I've gone out and done that too before, where I've gone to people, is like, hey, tell me what you honestly think about me. I think it's a great question to ask, and I did want to know, because I needed to know how I was coming off to people, right? Was I coming off, like a jackass, or was I coming off as a good person, right? I really wanted to know, and maybe it was a little bit to feed my ego, but it was really I don't think it was coming from that place, but I really wanted to know on ways to improve myself, so I didn't feel that I had to do certain things in a way that I was already doing. Maybe they could give me some clarity on a different path I could take, because I was able to improve myself, right? By asking that question to them, I did become more aware that, you know what, I'm overthinking it. I am a good person, and that's, and I did ask those additional deeper questions, saying, be honest and open with me. Why do you feel that way? Give me an example of what I've done to, make you think that. Give me that example. I want to know, what did I do? How, and in that, they'll tell you maybe how you impacted them as well. And you can see that positiveness, hopefully, within yourself, to be more aware of that too.
It might not be a bad exercise in also determining your strengths and weaknesses as well. So you ask your friends, what do you see me as being good at? Now, I don't see that as being like the best question all the time, because you need to get many answers, I think, to get a proper answer. And also, like, it depends on the people. Like, people might give you really dumb, silly, stupid answers that aren't helpful in any way. So if they're not people that you respect or trust, then you can't also trust them to give you the answers that you need. And that's where it gets really difficult. But in general, I think it's also a good exercise to go like, what are my strengths? What value do I add to you? What's good about me and what I'm doing for the world? And that, I mean, that's good from the perspective of your jobs, your opportunities, your freelancing work, your business, whatever it is you're looking to do.
Right. The last thing I wanted to talk initially about was ego, David, but I decided to take that off, and I actually wrote down something else instead. Ego, I think it's such a huge topic. I don't think we would be able to cover everything we want to cover about that topic in the last point that we have remaining. So instead, what I wrote was entitlement through society's, what we see in society. Right? So a lot of what we see in society these days is dictated by the news. It's dictated by music. It's dictated by celebrities.
A lot of media.
And we feel entitled to having everything that, especially in music, that these people that are making music, right? So I love hip hop music, and, I don't listen to it as much as I used to listen to it anymore, but I still do enjoy the occasional song here and there. But if you listen to a lot of that music, what is it saying, right? I have this big house. I have this chain. I have this fancy car. I have this crazy painting on my wall. I have, the flyest girl that, in all of the world, she's my wife, or she's my girlfriend, or, I'm spending so much money, just in the clubs and on strippers or whatever they're doing in this music, right? And it gives you a sense of, hey, if someone else is able to do it, then I should also be doing that, but without some people realizing these people have worked for it. They have worked for it. They've put out the music. Potentially the industry's feeding them the money to go look like they're, they've earned it. I don't know. But, that sense of entitlement, because a celebrity also is out there and they have a big house, and, you're being influenced by what you see, right? So it is important to, make sure you understand who you're being influenced by, so then you can understand what your influence is, and then why you should or should not feel entitled by what they have.
Yeah, and I think to me that's also a question of like identity. So who are you and what are you actually good at? Like you watch a star in a music video and you go, "Oh, well that's what I need to do." It's like, no, what you want is maybe their fame, or maybe what you want is maybe their money, or what you want is maybe the girls that they're surrounded by. And that might actually be a completely different trajectory than becoming the next hip hop star. Yeah. And so to me, like you can do many different things to accomplish fame, fortune, wealth, popularity, whatever it is that you're after. There's many different roads to it. You got to find what you're good at. Stop looking at what other people are good at. And that can also definitely tie into this whole thing of entitlement as well. And not to like poke too much fun at them. I think what they've done is they've actually cultivated the ability to be watched, is like Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian. We don't necessarily know that they have any other discernible talents, but we do know that they're fun to watch, and that's why people watch them.
David, is very true. And, as we're talking about TV and stuff, a lot of times, in North America, in Europe, countries that have, first world and second world countries, we're very entitled by what we see happening in society. If you look at what's happening in third world countries, a lot of people, they're just happy with what they have. They don't necessarily have this sense of entitlement to wanting a cell phone. We're paying $600, $700, $800 for cell phones, because we feel we're allowed to have these things, or we should have these things, right?
Right.
But, someone in a third world country just wants some water. Something so simple that we take for granted, they don't take for granted. If they can walk to a well to get that water, they don't have that sense of entitlement. It's a need, right? We have been born into, at least myself, I'm very happy. My parents left, India, came here to give my sister and myself a better life, right? So they automatically, I have this sense of entitlement because they came to this country to make my life and their life better, right? Where if they had stayed in India, my sense of entitlement may be different than it is today as well.
Well, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I overheard somebody talking about the other day. And I don't think it's totally an accurate model that's true, but I think there is some truth in it. There is some semblance of reality in it, which is this idea, we need shelter, we need food, and once those basic needs are taken care of, then we have this something that is prevalent in North America, but might be a luxury for other people, which is thinking about what we want to do with our life, because our base needs are almost always covered. We have an abundance of food, we have an abundance of shelter, and it's not that we don't have homeless people, it's not that we don't have people that choose other lifestyles, but if you want it, it's not that hard to get, in a sense.
No, and like we were talking about earlier about government help and government assistance, right? Because we have those programs in place to help people who can't help themselves, right?
Yes.
I mean, you go to any third world country, I haven't been to really poverty.
A third world country.
Yeah, I've been to
or like a place of poverty.
Yeah, poverty. That's the word I was looking for. I haven't been to places where they're completely you'll see on the TV and stuff like that. You'll see on like World Vision commercials, right?
Oh yeah.
I haven't been to that.
I've been seeing a lot more of those on TV lately.
I haven't been there, but I've been to countries where in India and stuff where poverty is pretty bad. But there are still a lot of middle class wealthy people as well, right? So sometimes poverty can get missed in between all the day-to-day activities of what we see as well, right? So, and then you don't think about what these other people are going through. Instead, you're only thinking about yourself. And that's, again, a little bit of that ego thing that I didn't really want to get into right now. But you only think about yourself and not really focus on what's happening in other people's lives as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a multi-layered problem. There's a lot of good things happening with social entrepreneurship, with countries helping other countries, with charities and nonprofit organizations, but that's just one layer to the whole thing. And we also have to consider like how much assistance is too much assistance that's not actually helping them or motivating them. If they're just handed food, then that needs covered, and thank you very much. They're not motivated to do anything else necessarily, or they don't know that, like they don't have the same privileges we have in North America, where we get to think deeply about who we are, what we want to do, and what we're good at. And it's just about shelter and food there. So it's a multi-layered problem, and not one we can solve just by giving. I wish it was. And
No.
if it was just about giving, I'm sure we would have solved that problem in like the last 4, 5, 6 decades.
Right. No, you're right. And, the more we, as people, keep giving to problems that we see out there, it's funny. I saw something the other day that said, we've been giving money to cancer for, the last 20, 30, 40 years to find that cure to cancer. But instead, what we have is no cure. In 40 years, they haven't been able to find a cure, and is it some other agenda behind it? I don't know, but if people keep giving multiple millions of dollars a year to something that supposedly can't be cured, people aren't going to stop giving to it.
Yeah. I think it's more likely that there is a cure and just there's an agenda in pushing it down and keeping it secret.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Or there are multiple cures even.
Yeah, probably. And there's a lot more money to be made, right? And then even these companies, these pharmaceutical companies, just going a little bit back, do have a sense of entitlement as well, because, they've done all the research to put out whatever drug they're trying to push on you, and they want to get their money out of it, right? Because they feel entitled that they should be making billions of dollars. They've made billions of dollars before, and they want to continue making the same, if not more than what they've done before, right? Because no company, even a small business owner or a large business owner, wants to make less than what they made the month before, the day before, or the year before, right? Everybody wants to make more and more and more, so they can take that investment and put it back in their business or put it into things that they want to do, maybe to help people as well.
Well, every industry that probably has a history of making huge profits wants to keep it that way.
Yeah.
That's why we hear about like recession here in Calgary. It's because people want to keep the oil and gas industry profitable and making huge revenues year after year. And that might have certain consequences and implications for example, the electric car, which, isn't necessarily the best option or the best alternative yet, because an electric car can also produce harmful pollutions in the air and stuff like that. So
right. And well, with that said, David, I think it's probably time to wrap up. So what are maybe one or two key points that you really want our listeners to focus on today?
Well, I would like everyone to think about this issue of entitlement from their own perspective. We can't tell you whether or not you're entitled, and we're not going to tell you that whether or not you're entitled. I think it would be presumptuous of us to do that. So really, you need to self-examine and figure out why, if you feel that you are deserving of certain privileges or special treatment, you need to think about why that is. And what part of upbringing, what part of your attitude, what part of your expectations, or even awareness is factoring into those things, and then have a close look at them. You can ask your friends. You can really dig deeper into yourself. You can mirror yourself back to yourself by using like a journal or meditation. And then if you are finding that you're entitled in certain areas, how could you tweak your thinking for it to be more productive? How could you tweak your thinking to go, well, I feel entitled to that, but like, what can I actually do? Like, what if I want this girl, what can I do to become the kind of person that she would like? Those are the kind of things that we need to, I think, begin thinking about.
Right on. One of the things that I feel that our listeners should consider at least is just being able to use what is available to us. For example, like I said, the library, reading books, and using those things. It is a sense of entitlement. If you know how to read and you don't read, then you're wasting your ability to learn something that maybe you can help other people with, you can better yourself through, you can educate your kids with and help them learn as well. But if you waste those talents, then I'm sure there's millions of people around the world that would love to know how to read just as well as we do, be able to speak on a microphone just like we do, and if we don't take that and use it, then I think we should lose that ability to do it as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the stats show that very few people do use that ability beyond college. So that's a really great point.
Absolutely.
Well, you've been listening to Using Your Power. We've been talking about entitlement and the various facets of it. We hope that what we've shared with you is beneficial to you and helps you to unlock your power. So go to usingyourpower.com for more. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Have a nice day.